Hey everyone, just quickly reminding you to hit the like and subscribe buttons and the notification bell before we get underway. Also, please take a moment to quickly drop a comment saying where you're listening from, or just leave a quick comment saying that you're doing your part. The night was cold and quiet on February 6, 2021, in the East Rock neighborhood of New Haven, Connecticut, a place typically synonymous with academia. Yale University student Kevin Jiang was driving home, about a week after the happiest moment of his life. At 26, he was a dedicated graduate student in the Yale School of the Environment, a former Army National Guard officer, and a man whose life was deeply anchored in faith and service. Just 1 week earlier, Kevin had become engaged to Zion Perry, a fellow Yale doctoral candidate in molecular biophysics and biochemistry. They were a couple built on shared values, scholarship, and commitment. That Saturday, Kevin and Zion had spent the day indulging in nature, hiking and ice fishing, before sharing dinner at her apartment. When Kevin left her home around 8:30 p.m. in his Toyota Prius, intending to drive the short distance to his own residence, he couldn't have anticipated the violence awaiting him. He barely made it 2 blocks. At the intersection of Lawrence and Nickel Streets, Kevin's car was struck from behind by a dark SUV. At first, this seemed to be nothing more than a minor fender bender. This common, low-stakes interaction was, in fact, an ingeniously designed trap, an intentional setup that guaranteed Kevin would leave the safety of his vehicle. As he stepped out, likely to check on the other driver and exchange insurance information, the facade of an accident vanished. The driver of the SUV pulled a gun and, in an act of staggering brutality, opened fire. The noise shattered the quiet academic streetscape, marking the end of Kevin Jiang's vibrant life in a volley of bullets. The crime scene itself immediately suggested this was no random act of road rage. Witnesses reported hearing the minor collision, followed by a torrent of gunshots. One witness saw muzzle flashes and noted that the shooter, dressed all in black, continued to fire bullets into the victim after he had already fallen. Kevin Jiang was struck a devastating 8 times. The proximity of some shots was so close that gunpowder left burn marks on his face. A chilling home surveillance video captured Kevin's final moments alive, confirming the swift and clinical execution described by witnesses and the powder marks. Detectives from the New Haven Police Department quickly gathered the physical evidence, including the 8 spent casings. Here, the case deepened considerably. Ballistic analysis linked those casings not just to a single incident, but to 4 recent non-fatal drive-by shootings. They had all occurred in the immediate area in the months leading up to the killing. At every non-fatal scene, 1 to 5 casings were recovered, all linked to this weapon. The emerging understanding of the evidence revealed a much more sinister truth. The shooter hadn't acted randomly. He had laid a meticulous, multi-stage plan, staging the prior shootings as decoys to mislead police into concluding that Kevin's death was merely part of a random string of violence. This strategic use of pre-crime suggested a perpetrator whose intelligence and planning extended far beyond typical offenders. It pointed to a motive that was highly personal and targeted, despite the perpetrator's attempt to construct a misleading narrative of randomness. The investigative focus soon shifted from the seemingly random nature of the ballistic evidence to the dark vehicle used in the attack. The vehicle used in all the crimes were 2013 GMC Terrains, which the perpetrator had taken out for test drives. For the vehicle he used to eliminate Kevin, he just straight up stole the vehicle during his test drive. The perpetrator had executed a careful deception. Around 11 a.m., he'd persuaded a salesman to let him take the SUV for an extended test drive. He claimed he needed to bring it to his mechanic for inspection before purchasing it. The salesman attached a dealer license plate, believing the arrangement to be legitimate. When the salesman called later that afternoon, The driver asked for more time, citing a fabricated family emergency, then stopped responding altogether. By 5:30 p.m., the car was reported stolen. The vehicle was eventually found abandoned on railroad tracks in North Haven, Connecticut, shortly after the final shooting. The chain of evidence, the stolen car, the specific caliber weapon, and the orchestrated decoy shootings quickly led investigators to the individual who had stolen the SUV. This was Chin Chuan Pan, a 29-year-old Massachusetts Institute of Technology researcher. Pan, who had received his bachelor's in computer science in 2013, was working as a researcher at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. Notably, he had been described as a genius by virtually all that had met him, but he had severe difficulties socializing. Authorities moved swiftly, naming Pan as a suspect on February 10, 2021, and issuing a warrant for his arrest on February 26th for the attacks and the vehicle theft. Pan was considered armed and dangerous, having vanished almost instantly after his deranged spree. The moment Pan was identified, detectives began exploring his link to the victim, Kevin Zhang. The connection led not to Kevin, but to his fiancée, Zion Perry. Both Pan and Perry had attended MIT, where they were acquaintances. Perry received her bachelor's degree in bioengineering from MIT the year prior. The two had crossed paths multiple times and had even been photographed together multiple times. However, the actual extent of their interaction was minimal. Perry stated they had never had a romantic relationship and that they barely knew each other. When Perry graduated, Pan had asked to video call her to congratulate her, an invitation she politely declined. Despite this minimal contact, detectives concluded that Pan had cultivated a severe obsession with Perry. This delusion, unknown to both Perry and Jiang, was likely triggered by the one piece of public information that shattered Pan's self-constructed fantasy. The announcement of Kevin and Zion's engagement on Facebook 1 week prior to the killing must have utterly destroyed his delusional worldview. Though the official motive was never fully confirmed by prosecutors during the legal process, the circumstantial evidence strongly points toward extreme, obsessive jealousy. Pan's highly premeditated actions, stealing a vehicle hours earlier, and staging multiple decoy attacks, suggest he wasn't reacting impulsively. He was executing a plan devised specifically to eliminate the man who was living what he believed should have been his own reality. However, the fact that he started his series of decoy attacks before the Facebook post throws a wrench in this theory, in my view. At any rate, we'll never know the truth, for reasons which are about to become apparent. Pan's calculated planning didn't end at the scene. He had prepared extensively for life on the run. Shortly after abandoning the stolen vehicle, he changed his cell phone number and began a cross-country flight. The Marshals Service was quickly enlisted to spearhead the manhunt, offering rewards for information that eventually reached $10,000. Pan was initially tracked to the suburban Atlanta, Georgia area, driving with relatives and reportedly acting strangely. Investigators recognized that Pan posed a significant flight risk, especially considering his family's reported access to large financial assets in Shanghai. The Marshals implemented a key strategy: meticulous surveillance of Pan's parents, believing that their movements and financial activities would eventually lead them to their son. Financial records showed the parents had been making large cash withdrawals, heightening the risk of Pan attempting to leave the country. This surveillance strategy finally paid off big time in May 2021, approximately 4 months after Kevin was gunned down. Investigators tracked Pan's parents south to Georgia again. During this trip, Pan's mother, Hong Huang, was observed at a hotel making a phone call using the clerk's phone. After this, She was observed attempting to delete the number that had been called. The marshals were able to track that critical communication, which led them over 1,100 miles away to Montgomery, Alabama. Pan was located at a boarding house living under the false name Henry Choi. When confronted by what was described as a small army of law enforcement, he surrendered peacefully, immediately admitting he wasn't Choi. The evidence found on him confirmed his intention for long-term evasion. Pan was in possession of approximately $20,000 in cash, 7 cell phones, and his dad's passport. His capture marked the culmination of countless hours of interagency cooperation across multiple states and federal agencies. Following his arrest and extradition back to Connecticut, Chin Chuan Pan was charged with a litany of crimes. In 2022, Pan's defense attorney, citing Pan as a communicative challenge, requested a mental competency exam. The attorney argued that Pan was evasive and uncooperative, providing only disjointed details about a potential second person being involved. This maneuver, which stalled the proceedings and raised questions about Pan's ability to assist in his own defense, required assessment by a state or court-appointed psychiatrist. However, state-appointed psychiatrists eventually assessed Pan, and he was ruled fit for trial in late 2022, confirming he understood the seriousness of the proceedings. Pan initially pleaded not guilty in December 2022 and maintained this position for quite some time. In February 2024, facing the prospect of a potentially devastating public trial, Pan unexpectedly changed his plea, admitting his guilt on all the charges. This crucial step was part of a plea agreement that allowed Pan's family to avoid getting caught up in the crossfire of the trial. The agreement stipulated a sentence of 35 years in prison without the possibility of probation or parole. This choice guaranteed certainty of punishment for the prosecution and provided a path to closure for the Zhang family, circumventing the trauma and unpredictability of a full courtroom battle. The final act of the legal drama occurred on April 25, 2024, when Judge Gerald Harmon formally sentenced Chin Chuan Pan to 35 years imprisonment at Cheshire Correctional Institution. This was exactly as outlined in the plea agreement, though the judge did have the ability not to agree to the terms as specified. During the hearing, several relatives and friends delivered powerful impact statements, underscoring the senseless devastation caused by the crime. Kevin's father eloquently described the vast potential lost, the bright future his son had planned, rooted deeply in faith and service. Pan, in a brief statement, offered an apology, saying he felt sorry for his actions and all the harm he had caused. Ultimately, since he pled guilty, we'll never really know what motivated Pan to commit this sick act, and I'm not even sure he fully understands it all himself. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick reminder to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't done so already. Also remember to check out the membership option by clicking join or hit the Patreon link in the description. It's the worst fear a parent can face, walking into a child's room and finding nothing but a chilling absence. For the family of 15-year-old Megan Nichols, that fear materialized on a hot summer night in Fairfield, Illinois. This quiet community would soon be gripped by a mystery that lasted 4 long, agonizing years. Yet, what made this disappearance so immediately devastating wasn't just the vanishing, but the calculated quiet left behind, an intentional crime scene designed to scream, "Run away." The individual who took Megan's life employed a sophisticated psychological deflection, leveraging the tensions of teenage life to build a wall of plausible deniability. This strategy successfully stalled the investigation, transforming the search for a killer into a fruitless quest for a missing person. Megan Nichols disappeared on July 3, 2014, leaving her home in Fairfield, Illinois, under profoundly suspicious circumstances. At first glance, the evidence suggested a planned voluntary departure. A note was found, presumably authored by Megan, telling her mother that she loved her, but that she wouldn't ever find happiness at home. It went further, containing strange, cryptic language, and pleading with her mother not to look for her, because she simply didn't want to be found. This written communication, combined with footage showing Megan making a bank withdrawal on the day she vanished, suggested she had chosen to flee her small-town life. However, the perpetrator wasn't satisfied with merely leaving a note. The scene contained another, more alarming piece of evidence: Megan's personal cell phone, which had been intentionally wiped completely clean of data. This suggested a level of premeditation far beyond that of a spontaneous teenage runaway. What would later become apparent was that the effect of these calculated actions was immediately successful and would remain so for some time. By establishing a convincing runaway scenario, the individual responsible for Megan's disappearance successfully channeled the investigation into a false missing person case. This deliberate delay granted the perpetrator precious time to dispose of the body, solidify an alibi, and allow critical physical evidence to disappear. Megan's mother, Kathy Jo, immediately doubted the circumstances, reporting her daughter's absence at once and insisting her daughter hadn't simply run off. While the public was encouraged to believe in the runaway theory, investigators quickly identified a key person of interest: 18-year-old Brody Merbarger. Megan, who was 15 at the time, had been dating Merbarger, a relationship that was reportedly a source of disagreement and tension with her mother. While the sources don't exactly state what the source of the disagreement was, I don't think you have to look further than the age gap to figure out why any parent would want this stopped. The relationship offered the perfect motivational framework for the planned disappearance. Merbarger could easily tell police they had decided to run away together, leveraging the existing familial rift to support the note's contents. The critical timeline detail, however, was Merbarger's actions immediately following Megan's disappearance. Though sources suggested the couple intended to run off as a pair, Merbarger returned home alone the following morning. He provided a narrative that initially seemed to satisfy immediate questioning, allowing him to resume his life. According to him, she just decided to go it on her own, and that was apparently good enough for the investigators at the time. The case remained in limbo for more than 3 years, featured on various national true crime programs designed to raise awareness for missing persons. Investigators faced intense pressure, but the breakthrough they desperately needed didn't come until late 2017. The waiting period demonstrated how effective Merbarger's initial concealment strategy had been, allowing him to live freely while Megan was listed as missing. In December 2017, the years of searching finally yielded a devastating answer. Human remains were discovered in a rural area of Wayne County, Illinois, on a farm. The discovery was initially described as a human skull and bones, which appeared to have been placed in a shallow grave and potentially wrapped in a blanket. A month later, authorities confirmed the identity. The remains belonged to Megan Nichols. This grim finding irrevocably shifted the investigation, validating her mother's long-held suspicions and officially converting the case into a homicide investigation. Forensic analysis later determined the cause of death was probable asphyxiation. The nature of the concealment, a shallow grave, suggested a panicked, opportunistic effort by the killer to hide the body quickly after the crime. This lack of careful planning ultimately contributed to the remains being found years later, negating Merbarger's hope that the body would never be recovered. Once the remains were identified and the cause of death established, The investigation rapidly returned to Brody Merbarger, who by 2017 had moved on with his life. The focus immediately shifted to finding the irrefutable physical link needed for prosecution. In a move that proved decisive, investigators successfully located and searched Merbarger's vehicle, even though it had ended up in a scrapyard. This search represents a triumph of modern cold case forensics. Years after the crime, specialized forensic teams were able to recover and identify minute, trace amounts of Megan Nichols' blood from inside Merbarger's car. This physical evidence placed Megan inside his car at the time of her death or immediately afterward, providing proof that he had transported the body to the rural grave site. Furthermore, digital evidence reinforced the physical findings. Investigators successfully recovered and analyzed thousands of text messages exchanged between Merbarger and Megan. These provided a crucial window into the nature of their relationship and the events leading up to her death. Faced with overwhelming forensic and digital evidence, Merbarger was indicted by a grand jury in September 2020 on multiple felony counts. He was subsequently arrested without incident in Evansville, Indiana, awaiting extradition back to Illinois. The trial focused on the key pieces of evidence: the recovery of Megan's remains, the cause of death, the history revealed through the thousands of text messages. However, most damningly was the presence of Megan's blood inside Merbarger's vehicle and his attempts to scrub it clean. Despite the passage of time and Merbarger's initial efforts to establish a voluntary disappearance, the state successfully proved that Merbarger had intentionally killed the teenager. In October 2022, a jury found Brody Merbarger guilty in the first degree. Merbarger's attorneys attempted to challenge the verdict, filing a motion for a new trial claiming the evidence didn't align with the jury's decision. Despite this request, it was ultimately denied by the judge, who found that the evidence supported the jury's decision. In the culmination of the legal process, Brody Merbarger, by then 27 years old, returned to the courtroom for sentencing. Given the egregious nature of the crime and the calculated concealment of the body for years, the court handed down a sentence of 50 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. This final legal resolution, however, only offered a partial form of closure. During the proceedings, impact statements delivered by those close to Megan conveyed a profound sense of catharsis. This confirmed that justice, to the best extent possible within the legal system, had been delivered. Yet the pain remained palpable. Megan's mother, Kathy Jo, shared the enduring sorrow of losing not just a daughter, but her best friend. She also shared the additional trauma that was inflicted by Merbarger, concocting a false runaway scenario. This, of course, gave false hope for years that Megan may have still been alive, when, of course, the person who had orchestrated that narrative knew she wasn't. The idea that he would have kept Megan's family believing that she was alive and out of contact for the rest of their lives is just absolutely disturbing. It seems like a level of mass psychological damage added onto the crime by this killer, and I question why he would commit such a sick act. That said, I guess I shouldn't expect much better from an 18-year-old guy who was dating a 15-year-old girl and ultimately killed her. Anyway, rest in peace, Megan. You deserved so much better.